Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for joining me once again today. And my name is General Confusion, and this is Total War Warhammer 2. Specifically, this is another Lizardmen versus High Elves matchup, and the reason I'm showing this is because I want to talk a little bit about this particular matchup, Lizardmen versus the High Elves. I've had it happen several times to me now, as I've been playing more Lizardmen battles, getting back into it over yesterday and today, that I'll load into a quick battle and I'll immediately choose the Lizardmen, because I know that's what I'm playing as. And as soon as I do that, my opponent will switch to High Elves. It's happened 3 or 4 times in a row. And I wanted to talk about this matchup because I think people have this idea that High Elves are a great counter to the Lizardmen, and they're not. I'm going to show this in a very simple way. I've got my Monster Mash build. 2 Bastillodons with Revivification Crystals, 1 Solar Engine, 4 Kroxigors, Krokgar on his Carnosaur, Grimlock, 1 Feral Bastillodon, a Skink Priest of Heavens, and then 2 Feral Cold Ones just for a little bit of flanking power to use up extra money. And this build just straight face rolls High Elf Infantry. You can see my opponent here has brought a very solid anti-Lizardman build. He's got Spearmen on the flanks, he's got a White Lions unit for armor piercing, he's got a unit of Phoenix Guard, his center is 3 Swordmasters of Hoeth, which are pretty expensive, but they're solid armor piercing infantry, and then he has a Mage of Light, who has brought Net of Amontok. He also has a Prince on a Sun Dragon, so a flying monster lord, very useful. He's got a unit of Illyrian Reavers and a unit of Dragon Princes, which are great cavalry, and are sure to clean up my cold ones in very short order. And he has this very hard-hitting, armor-piercing elite infantry corps, which doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. So my Feral Bastillodon is going to go into the Swordmasters. I'm actually walking it through in order to not get it stuck, so I can have it behind the lines. The Kroxigors charge in, and look, my Skink Priest is getting chased off by the Prince. Only gets 1 spell off. That 1 spell does a lot of damage to this central unit of Swordmasters, but then the Skink Priest has been netted and it's going to be killed and driven off by the Prince. Over here, my cold ones are getting wiped out. They're doing some damage to the Illyrian Reavers. That's fine. These Spearmen are coming around to get at my monster. But the fact of the matter is, if you look over here, White Lions getting crushed by the Kroxigors, doing a lot of damage in return, but getting crushed in the middle. Swordmasters getting crushed by Kroxigors and the Feral Bastillodon. Over here, the Phoenix Guard are holding up. These Swordmasters are half dead already. They've got a Bastillodon in there, the Kroxigors, basically, and they've got Krokgar in there as well. But so, I'm going to fast forward, because this battle is actually very, very simple. I slammed my monsters in there, my spellcaster got chased off, and look, my monsters are just kind of cleaning up. The Kroxigors are dying, but because of all that Revivification Crystal I have, I'm just popping that every chance I get. My Feral Bastillodon is over here chasing off all these routing units. The White Lions, these Swordmasters are getting chased off, so they're not coming back. And I'm dropping... He's dropped a Net of Amontok on me to keep me from moving, but that's fine. I'm where I want to be. I'm in melee with the Swordmasters and all his infantry. And despite the fact that they're armor-piercing and or anti-large, they can't kill me faster than I kill them. The Revivification Crystals are keeping Krokgar very healthy and themselves very healthy. Over here, my Solar Engine is just munching on his Spearmen, because Spearmen don't have armor piercing, so they can't deal with 140 points of armor. And all this, he's cycle charging in the Prince in an effort to kill Krokgar, but cycle charging with flying units doesn't do a whole lot of damage anymore, since I think impact damage on flying units charges got nerfed, so he keeps dropping nets to keep me in place, but I'm fine with being kept in place. I want to be kept in place. Krokgar is running out of here to get another charge in with the swiftness of Itzel, cycle charging him a little bit. The High Elf Cavalry is running around, not really able to accomplish much. Few surviving Kroxigors rampaging, but look, even against all this armor-piercing anti-large infantry, those Kroxigors are up to 82 kills and climbing. These Kroxigors over there I think got wiped out. No, there they are. Those Kroxigors are coming back in. They're at 92 kills and climbing. And as you can see, now all his units are routing, because once they've been damaged, they're terror routed. And that's it. That's the game. I did not have to micro much at all. My spellcaster was wiped out very early on. My monsters just pretty much got stuck in and fought, and they were fighting against units that should be very good against them. But it's not working out. This is that concentration of force thing I was talking about. These units, even when these units are actually fighting monsters, most of their numbers can't hit any one unit at a time. And with the Kroxigors take more damage, as you can see, but even so, 91 kills there, 95 kills there. This was against armor-piercing units, elite, expensive armor-piercing units. 95 kills. This unit of Kroxigors wiped out a Swordmaster's unit. So did this one. These two did worse. I think this one was the one that was right in the center and got countercharged by the Phoenix Guard. But even so, they did pretty respectably, and 45 kills against elite infantry represents a lot of damage done, a lot of HP taken away. The Revivification Crystals got in there, did quite a bit of damage. The Feral Bastiladon didn't do a lot of damage, but it chased 2 elite units off the board entirely, and Kroq-Gar got a ton of kills. So, High Elves, I think, are actually the easiest matchup for Lizardmen. So, let's go into Custom Battle here and kind of talk about the matchup. High Elves they just don't have a lot of the tools that you really need to deal with those big monsters. I mean, they do have the Phoenix Guard, and the Phoenix Guard are very good. They're also very expensive, that's kind of the thing, but they have charge defense against all, they're anti-large armor piercing, and they have this 30% physical resistance, so they do not die quickly. They cause fear. Here's the one thing about the Phoenix Guard that makes it hard to actually use them against monsters. They're not immune to terror. So terror routing will just happen. For those who don't know the mechanisms of that, once you've lost a certain amount of leadership, I forget what exactly the threshold is, but once you're on low leadership, and you're around a unit that inspires terror, the unit may just rout, and it'll say terrified on the unit card. Terror just kicks in sometimes. I think you have to pass a leadership check to keep it from kicking in, and once it kicks in, you rout for a short period of time. But once you've started routing, you can't come back from routing if there's an enemy unit chasing you. So once you start terror routing, it's possible to be escorted completely off the game board. So that's a weakness of the Phoenix Guard. That said, they are very, very strong. It's just that they're very, very expensive. So in a 12,000 point match, I mean, if you take 3 Phoenix Guard, that's more than a third of your army right there. The Swordmasters of Hoeth, they are a little too expensive to use against monsters, really, because they do have armor piercing, but they have this big bonus versus infantry that they're paying for, and they have this missile resistance that they're paying for in that 1,300 point cost. It's only 20%, but it is something. Yeah, 20% less than a standard shield. But so, they're heavily armored, which doesn't help them against the armor-piercing attacks of all of these monsters. Here, let me load in my Kroxigor mash, my monster build, just to show you. Feral Bastiladon's armor-piercing, Bastiladon's armor-piercing, 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 armor-piercing. The only unit that's not armor-piercing in this army is the Skink Priest, and if the Skink Priest is in melee, then something's gone wrong. So, Swordmasters of Hoeth, armor doesn't really help them. The anti-infantry bonus doesn't help them, and it's a pretty big anti-infantry bonus. So, in this matchup, not terribly useful. Spearmen. They do have anti-large, and it's a pretty decent-sized bonus versus large, but they don't have much armor-piercing damage. So, 19 to 6. That bonus versus large, only like 4 points of that are going to go to armor-piercing, so their armor-piercing attacks will be about, their weapon attacks overall against large targets will be about 10 AP damage, but against a Bastiladon, they're going to be doing about 11 or 12 damage a hit, is what that means. And a Bastiladon has almost 5,800 hit points. So the Spearman can't do damage rapidly, and that's the problem. The problem basically is, against monsters backed up with the Revivification Crystals and the castings of Cold-Blooded, you have to do damage not just consistently, but fast. Because Revivification Crystal means every minute I get to regenerate 600 health, approximately, on any monster I choose. And I get to do it twice. So actually it's every 30 seconds I get to regenerate 600 health on any monster I choose. So if you're targeting a monster and you're not doing at least 800 or 900 damage per 30 seconds, that monster isn't going to die. You noticed in that replay I was showing you, the only units that I lost where I lost the Skink Priest, I lost the Cold Ones, and I lost most but not all of the Kroxigors. All of my Bastiladons and Kroq-Gar were not only alive, they were in very good health, and that was despite having been locked in melee with these 4 units, plus a couple of Spearmen, and what was his build again? It was a couple of Spearmen, a Dragon Prince, an Illyrian Reaver, he had a Light Mage, and he had a Prince on a Sun Dragon. Yeah, that was his build. So, despite being locked in melee with all these units for pretty much the entire length of the battle, my monsters were not dead, and they were not close to dead, because the Lizardmen have such healing and they have such concentration of force. So, as the High Elves, what can you do about this is the question. Well, I think going heavy infantry is actually the wrong decision, because infantry can't stop monsters and they can't focus on monsters. What you have to do, I think, as the High Elves... Now, I haven't played High Elves all that much. I haven't done a focus on them yet. But as the High Elves, I think what you have to do is focus on ranged units and magic. So, the Prince on the Sun Dragon, I think that's probably a decent choice. He's a flying monster. He has pretty good damage. He can fly around. He can drive off the Skink Priest, and that was valuable. Getting the Priest off the board before he could cast more than one spell, that was very, very useful. You might even go up to the Star Dragon, because... for 2 reasons. First of all, the Star Dragon has generally better stats, including more HP, a lot more, which will help you tank out Kroq-Gar's attacks. Also, he has more armor-piercing weapon damage, but the Star Dragon also has the Star Dragon's Breath, and the Star Dragon's Breath is very effective on stationary, large targets. So if you can get the Star Dragon hovering and breathe a couple of times on the Revivification Crystals, which have to be your #1 target to get that healing off the board, if you can hit them with a couple Star Dragon Breaths, I think the Star Dragon can basically remove at least one of these from the field for free. Or at least he can force me to focus all my healing on it, rather than on the units that are doing most of the damage. So, Prince on a Star Dragon might be a good pick. You might even take a Princess on a Star Dragon, because she does have a missile attack, so she can just hover and plink without any risk. It's not a whole lot of armor-piercing damage, but it's something. It will add to the DPS. And she doesn't have to be in melee to do it. Plus, I think she's very slightly cheaper. 2884. Yeah, very slight. Doesn't really make a difference. Mage-wise, Mage of Light for Net of Amantok would be a good choice, but you have to use Net of Amantok to break the army up. Because what you don't want is, you don't want to be stuck in melee with all the monsters at the same time. So, Faw's Protection, not terribly useful. Most of the monsters are doing splash damage and they're ignoring armor, so that's less useful than could be. Light of Battle might actually be very useful, especially when overcast, because the big risk is that all of your units will chain rout at once from all of the terror and the damage that they've taken. So dropping Light of Battle late in the fight could be very, very useful. It lasts only 25 seconds, so it only gives you a short reprieve, but that might be long enough. Barona's Time Warp could also be useful. A bunch of more melee attack could really help your Phoenix Guard or other units put a lot of hurt on these monsters very quickly. Now, the Phoenix Guard actually already have a pretty good hit chance, but I think, if I've got the math right, a casting of Barona's Time Warp with its plus 26 melee attack would basically max out their hit chance against Bastiladons. And Kroxigors, for that matter, so might be worth it. Might be worth taking the Mage of Light with Light of Battle, Net of Amantok, and Barona's Time Warp. Item-wise, yeah, both of these are actually really useful. I might take them both. They're expensive, but having the ability to cast those spells throughout the battle could be very, very useful. Especially, you want a net early on to get rid of the Skink Priest, or any flying magic users the enemy might have. And you're also going to want the net available again to stop the enemy line. After that, having a Phoenix Guard, probably a good investment. White Lions of Trace might be good, but I think I would prefer Spearmen just because they will actually last longer. They have lower armor, but against all that AP damage, that doesn't matter, and they have higher melee defense, so they'll get hit less. So I would probably get some Spearmen for the rest of the line. And then, cavalry, against the lizardmen, you don't have to use cavalry all that much. None of your cavalry is anti-large, so none of it is terribly, terribly useful against monsters, and none of it can, basically, nothing except Dragon Princes can actually beat a monster once they catch it, and the Dragon Princes are very expensive for that task. You know, you could have 1,400 points tied up against 1,100 points or 700 points forever, and take a bunch of casualties, so that's not good. But what I think you probably do want is you probably do want an Eagle Claw or two for those anti-large shots, which are actually pretty efficient. They have a bonus versus large of 50, which means that every time they hit a monster, they're actually doing over 150, I think 160 armor-piercing damage per shot. And of course, there's 3 of them firing every 10 seconds from each unit. So a couple of Eagle Claw bolt throwers could be very, very useful. And then I think you want archers. Lothern Sea Guard, potentially, but they're more expensive. Well, the shieldless ones could work. I think you really want archers, because they have the long range. Yeah, their damage is not armor piercing, but they can start putting damage down soon. And they can put damage down very consistently. The most important factor is that they can all concentrate on one target. So what these archers have to do is they have to pick out a target, probably one of the Revivification Crystal Bastiladons, and just start laying hurt on it immediately and never stop until they run out of ammunition. Actually, you might target out the Croxagores first just to get them off the field, because they do distract attention from the monsters. But yeah, archers, Lothern Sea Guard wouldn't be a terrible choice, because they can defend themselves a little bit in melee, but really, you just want your skirmishers to be running out of melee if a monster ever catches them, so that they can then resume shooting. You don't need the ones with shields, but a couple Lothern Sea Guard, some archers, and then 1 unit of cavalry. And this 1 unit of cavalry, these Illyrian Reavers, in this army, their purpose is only to countercharge monsters that have broken through your infantry and gotten into your archers. So a monster, a Bastiladon or Krokgar or whatever, charges out of the main fight into your archers. That unit of archers starts pulling away, and the Illyrian Reavers charge in. They hold the monster in place while the archers get out and resume firing, and then they pull away. They're not going to be useful for more than a couple of those, but a couple of times they can stop a monster attack in its tracks, and that could be very, very useful. So this, I'm not sure this specific build is what I'd use, but this is the kind of thing I would use as the High Elves against Lizardmen. Because Lizardmen infantry aren't nearly as scary. They're effective, but like Saurus Warriors with shields, yeah, they have shields, they have high HP, but their melee stats are actually pretty low. Their weapon strength is very high, so that's dangerous, but melee stats pretty low, speed not exceptional, charge bonus not exceptional, and they rampage, so you can lead them around by the nose once you've done some damage. So I'm not scared of Saurus Warriors. As a High Elf player, I would be scared of this, because as I just showed you in that little replay, the Lizardman player can literally smash his whole army face first into yours, even if you take a dedicated anti-armor build. Those monsters can just bull into your line and wreck it, and there's no recourse. Your Phoenix Guard won't save you. Swordmasters won't save you. White Lions won't save you. Neither will Spearmen. Dragon Princes won't save you. I think you have to be concentrating your firepower from ranged units on 1 unit as soon as you can and as consistently as you can, and that's really your only chance in the matchup. I think High Elves versus Lizardmen, I think, is actually a very tough matchup. The Dark Elves have it much easier. But anyway, that's all I had to say for tonight. I'll be trying to get you more Lizardman play. I really, really want to take Lizardmen against the Dark Elves, and I'm a little surprised that it hasn't really happened yet. I've had 1 match against the Dark Elves, and that was several days ago, and I didn't bother to record it because basically I lost very, very quickly and very badly. I had only just started playing the Lizardmen, and I didn't have a handle on how they worked, so the Dark Elf player just kind of ran over me, and it wasn't even a build thing. It was just a player familiarity thing. He knew how to use his army, and I did not. So I'm going to try to get another Dark Elf match. Like I said, I've been surprised at how few of those I've been getting, because from my perspective, I think Dark Elves are probably the ones to beat as Lizardmen. The Dark Elf matchup is, I think, the hardest, because they have all of that armor-piercing ranged power. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll be bringing you more battles and more strategy-focused content soon. And so subscribe to the channel if you like what you see, and stay tuned for more.